All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the SENS Nation podcast. And we are very pleased to be hanging out with former Ottawa Senator Mark Borowiecki, who is now a development coach with the Nashville Predators, still lives in this area. So he's a local guy through and through, and we're pleased to have him on the show once again. Mark, how are you doing?
Good. I appreciate you having me on. Excited to chat. Doing well. Just enjoying that last little bit of downtime before training camp fires up. My old training partner and SENS coach, Ben Sexton, and I, we always said when we were training partners in the summer, we'd wake up in August and be like, man, it smells like training camp out here right now. We're starting to get those mornings now. So, the juices start flowing a little bit for training camp for sure.
You glad to see him get a nice role with the Senators as an assistant coach?
Yeah, he's awesome. I think obviously I'm biased because he's a friend of mine, but I think sky's the limit for him in his coaching career in terms of, just his work ethic, his desire to contribute, his desire to learn and get better. I think his career will go as far as he wants it to. I can't speak highly enough about him.
Nice. So generally the summer with the family, maybe get a little golf in. How's it been?
Golf is few and far between with 3 kids, 5 and under. Tough to justify 5 hours on a golf course some days, but no, it's been great. A lot of pool time. Kiddos are fish, so we're outside a lot. We're soaking up the sun. Wife and I had our 10-year anniversary. Went to Paris for a few nights. It was our first time in Europe, Tara. So yeah, that was a fun little experience. And yeah, just a lot of family time before the grind starts again.
What'd you do in Paris? Anything good?
We walked a lot. We're those kind of people on trips. We walk, we explore, we don't really have a set route or path. We knew the landmarks we wanted to hit and the things we wanted to do, restaurants, whatever, but just kind of see how we could get there, side streets, back streets, whatever it was, and get a feel for the city. And we loved it. Awesome.
That's great. Let's get an update on where you're at right now. I mean, obviously you're with the Nashville Predators in development. I think it's about a month ago now, right after the draft. In fact, some of the guys that the Predators drafted this year, you're working with them on the ice. I think it was at Dev Camp, and you're working with them. Not at least in the video that I saw, it wasn't necessarily puck skill or boxing it in front of the net. It was teaching them the basics of fighting. That's part of it, right? Like these kids come in, and not all of them have the ability to look after themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean that usually gets the most airtime after it's one of those things like that's 2% of it, right? We're seminars, we're video, we're tons of on ice work, and for me, I never approach guys and say, hey, we're working on this. If someone asks me a question, I'll help out. Usually, my message is learn from my mistakes. I was a little too prideful, I think, when I was younger, and I don't know if shy is the right word, but felt like it was kind of a sign of weakness asking guys like Nealer and Karks for help. I think I, suffered a few scars because of it. So my message is always learn from my mistakes. Go and ask someone. If the older guy's me, great. If it's a teammate, fine. If it's something you want help with, just don't be too prideful. There's guys you can learn from and take care of yourself. But again, a super small part of it. I think probably less and less a part of it as the game goes on here and the game evolves. But if a guy shows interest, you're always there to support him.
How long did you go before you went to Chris Neal or one of the other tough guys the Sens had during your time here? Like, how long did you go trying to fight with what you knew through your junior and college years?
It was just too long. I don't even know if there's an exact date. I mean, the real, I think, eye-opener for me, honestly, was I started working with some MMA guys here in Ottawa.
Okay.
A guy named Jeff Harrison in Nepean, and went on a bit of a tear the next year in Nashville. I think I was 11-2, whatever it was, led the league in majors, something like that. And all of a sudden, unbeknownst to me, I'd become a heavyweight in the league, which I wasn't really sure how that happened. But, I was kind of kicking myself for not doing something like that sooner. So hindsight is 20/20, I guess.
I probably ask you this every time you're on, but it just seems like we're just moving faster and faster away from fighting being a key part of the game to being kind of a sideline part of the game. Where's it at for you right now? Is it still have a place? Because it seems like there's more and more fans too that have less time for it. I'm old school, obviously, so I come from a different place. I don't feel that way. But where are you at with fighting in the game today?
I think for me, it's kind of the heat of the moment. If that's how it manifests sometimes, those emotions, then fair enough. I think we're going to see less and less of the stage fights, and I'm fine with that too. Certainly I look at it from a different lens now, which maybe is wrong of me. For me, it was a way to survive in the league and make a name for myself. If I was coaching my son, I'd be focused on competing, playing hard, playing with some passion and some emotion, and whatever results. I'm not going to encourage him to go fight. So maybe that's your answer there. If that's the way I'm going to focus on it with my son, I'm not going to push other kids too. I don't really have much desire to see 17-year-old kids hitting each other. Doesn't do it for me at the junior level. Again, I want to see guys go out there and compete, play with passion, play with some aggressiveness, embrace the contact, embrace the confrontation, whatever results. But from a coaching standpoint, for me, it's play hard, play extremely hard defensively, play hard offensively, have that puck be a pain in the butt to contain, to check, to cover. And you know what? Sometimes when you play that relentless style, that high energy, high motor style, things are going to happen.
I don't want to sound like old grandpa here, these kids today, but I'm curious to know about these kids today. And you've seen, I'm sure, a difference, coming up, through the junior ranks, and making it to the NHL. Like that's not that long ago, at least by my barometer. It's probably changed a lot just for you from the start of your career to what you're seeing from the kids now. I think about the two things. The one is that they grew up through their formative years with their noses in a screen of some kind, whether it's gaming or social media, or that's one issue that this young crew that you're working with now as a development coach with Nashville, one thing to deal with. And then there's the other angle of just all hockey all the time, 12 months a year, and forsaking all else, basically, including other sports. Which of those elements do you think is more affected today's athlete coming into the NHL versus when you came into the NHL?
Just opened a Pandora's box for me here as a young father, trying to navigate these things, and a coach in general athletics, right? Man, I think you're all over it with both points. I think it's a team effort. I think there's a lot of layers to that onion in terms of the phone usage and how that affects kids through prime developmental years. I think that's why you're seeing more and more high performance teams, organizations invest in, mental skills coaches, psychologists, any kind of mental health support. I think it's incredibly necessary just based on the landscape and the environment that these kids are coming up through. Certainly something to be mindful of. How do we get kids off screens? What does that do to athletic performance? What does that do to a kid's mental health? What does that do to a young player, girl or boy, who's on social media, which I think can be a bit of a, repository for negative thought, right? Do we want them constantly exposed to that? What does that do for their mental well-being? And how does that affect them, translate to them playing on field, on ice? I think it's a really valid question and conversation, one I don't have the answers to, one I have tactics that I use. But, I think super pertinent for sure. Didn't really answer your question there. I think it's tough to kind of nail it down. But in terms of the early specialization side, I had listened to Brad Living talk about it on a podcast, Glass and Out Coaches Site podcast, and I thought he had an interesting point. And, I think when you see kids specialize early, certainly the overall skill level, the floor and the ceiling of skill in ice hockey has increased because of that. Kids have more reps. Kids are exposed to more reps at a younger age. So yeah, it's probably a positive outcome for overall skill. Is it a positive outcome in terms of longevity and overall health for these young athletes? I would wager no. Hip resurfacing wasn't a thing for us. Sports hernias, I was one of the few guys who had a sports hernia. That was a new thing. I would probably guess you're going to see a lot more hip labrums, hip resurfacing, double sports hernia coming along from kids being on the ice 365 days of the year. I think that's something we all need to be mindful of physically. I think in terms of mental, longevity, burnout, whatever you want to call it. We want these players, these young athletes to have positive relationships with their sports. How do we foster that and make sure that that's a thing? We want them to have juice and energy when the time comes to compete, right? Not be so burnt out. And then, lastly for me, we've got, I think, a lot of people who will pay an infinite amount of money for, a strength coach, whatever, whoever it is, to take a kid out to a field house or take a kid to a field and work on cutting and running mechanics. Well, I watched my 5-year-old son play flag rugby and organically learn how to cut and stop and start and do all these things that we're throwing a ton of money at. Probably why, again, I'm a proponent for playing a second sport. And I think most guys who are playing hockey at a high level would probably argue that kids should be playing a second sport. I think it's great just, again, to feel replenished, rejuvenated emotionally, physically, mentally. And you get all these other benefits of playing a field sport, playing whatever it is. So I threw a lot at you. I'm down a bit of a rabbit hole right now. I apologize, but I think it's a pretty pertinent, important conversation to be having in 2025.
Yeah, I agree. And then you warned me it was going to be a Pandora's box, and we went down that road, and it was all good. I really appreciate it, though. You
sat there and listened to me politely, so I appreciate that.
No, because I found it interesting, and I think the listeners did too. I mean, I was amazed, though. I think it was Chris Schwartz, who I think was a strength and development coach for a while, and I ended up at one of those Hockey Canada coaching certification courses, and he was teaching it, and he spoke. And he didn't name names, but there were a couple of players in and around your era where he said, at one point they're throwing the football around. They couldn't even throw a football. And I even saw this week Joe Burrow, the Cincinnati Bengals quarterback. He ended up, I think he was at some kind of sports card show or something. And it was one of those throw a baseball, radar or target shooting. Anyway, he couldn't throw a baseball straight. So here's a guy with one of the best quarterback arms going, but he couldn't throw a baseball. So it's there's a lot of reasons.
And I will say, Steve, you mentioned Chris Schwartz, like he was our trainer, he was my trainer this summer. We would go to the field house twice a week, and you know what we would do? We would do a ton of games. We do games-based training. These ways to kind of move or learn all these things organically, right? I think that was a huge thing, and I know for me personally, like that was when I felt best on the ice. Doing that kind of stuff. So that's why I'm kind of a proponent for it.
Nice. So back to the development coaching situation. Are you still loving it? I mean, despite everything we just talked about, like is that filling your cup right now?
Yeah. It's a great fit right now. I think it's, every other player I've talked to, ex-player I've talked to, even my bosses, it's development's it can be a great transition piece too, right? A great transition role. Take a bit of a breath, you're kind of 3/4 of the way in, figure out where you want to go from there. I think there was probably similar to a lot of players, long stretches of my career where I was like, no way I'm coaching, so resistant to it. And now I'm like, I think I'd enjoy coaching. So I think that's the benefit of having the opportunity to step back for a couple of years, help some guys along, contribute to the organization in as many ways as I can and kind of chart a path for myself and see what I like more. I think I get a real drive, a real charge now from, running a video session, from talking in front of the group, from helping players, from seeing, them make sort of incremental gains on the ice, off the ice, whatever it is. And I'm like, to me, that's kind of the essence of coaching. So, more and more of appeal for sure.
I think when we last spoke, maybe we did. When we spoke last summer, I think we were in a mode of excitement for the Nashville organization with all the free agent signings. And if I'm to sum up the season that was, it's kind of, for me, I could do it in one word, and it is what? I don't understand. I mean, I thought the team was loaded for bear, and they had a really tough season. The record was not indicative of the roster. What's the organization's general feel about the season that was, and can they bounce back for the coming season?
Yeah, I mean, certainly disappointment. Like, I don't think you can frame it any other way, and I think everyone in the organization would agree. Now, having said that, disappointment, failures, call them what you want. They've got to be framed as an opportunity to learn, right? So I think it's an opportunity for us to grow as an organization. Things didn't go the way that they were intended, whether, the expectations were internal or external. So now the onus is on us to go back and kind of learn from those experiences, those mistakes, whatever you want to call them, those shortcomings at all levels. For me, at the development level, how do we get more young guys contributing quicker? Or contributing with longevity, whether it's, lessons from personnel, whether it's lessons on ice play, off ice things. We all need to kind of take a step back, reflect, and learn. And hopefully when you do that, it actually sets you up to go even further forward, right? I'm kind of a believer in that. I think, you don't really learn lessons from winning sometimes. You learn lessons from failures, from losing. And it's about what you want to do with those lessons and how you want to go forward. So that's going to be the focus for us. I think it has to be the focus for us. And it's going to start with a hard competitive training camp and kind of make a good building block there and go from there.
Well, best of luck with the bounce back. And I think back to the other NHL team, the one you broke in with and spent a lot of time with, the Ottawa Senators. And not to sort of contrast them or anything like that, but I know you have a soft spot for the team you broke in with. And what was your general impression of their season that was, how they're looking, and them finally making the playoffs for the first time since, well, you were part of that team in 2017.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great step. I mean, just as a Ottawa resident, member of this community, just the excitement around the city leading into that playoff run. Like, I know my kids got caught up in it, 5, 3, and 2, running around the house yelling, "Go Sens, go!" Like there was I think a pretty tangible buzz around the city, which is awesome to see. As a lifelong Ottawa resident, as a guy born and raised here, I think the city's, deserve playoff hockey, and the city's a better place with playoff hockey. So that was great. I was fortunate enough to go to a couple of games just in a family capacity. The Sens alumni were great to set me and my wife and my kids up in the alumni suite. And, we were at a couple of games, and again, the energy in the building was awesome. I think the energy from their core players was awesome. I think credit to that coaching staff, in terms of, instilling a little more defensive accountability, responsibility, buy-in. I think that was awesome. And I think you see the product of that. I think that's kind of the next step for that group to keep building off that. I think, skill, you need it. You need skill to win. That's undoubtedly true. But you also need buy-in from your group. And I think you're starting to see that buy-in a little more away from the puck, and credit to them, and hopefully an opportunity to build off that. As long as it's not against the Preds. When it's against the Preds, we'll win every game. But,
there you go.
Anyone else, sure.
Understood. Here in Canada, we don't just make lights. We craft possibility, connection, and celebration, built right here by people who care about what they're creating. At Celebrite, we're made of all the colors of the RGB rainbow, each person bringing their own brilliance. Because when we come together, we make something brighter. Celebrite.ca, proudly made in Canada. The Ford It's a Big Deal event is on. Right now at Jim K. Ford, lease a 2025 Escape Active all-wheel drive from $198 bi-weekly at 1.99% APR for 36 months with $2,755 down. That's like $99 weekly. Plus a $750 bonus for eligible Ford owners. Like we said, it's a big deal and it's on now, but not for long. Visit Jim K. Ford today for details or online at jimkford.com.
At Jim K. Ford Lincoln, we say yes!
So, I mean, a big part of the team's success is, a young leadership core led by Brady Tkachuk that is growing up before our eyes. And it feels like over the last 2-3 years, Brady Tkachuk has become a man in the game. And there he is on the NHL 26 cover this week. He was fabulous at the Four Nations. He's one of the 6 named to Team USA for the Olympics already. I'd like to know, because we see, we hear people, talking about him, but you're a former teammate of his, and I'm curious to know, what was it like to be Brady Tkachuk's teammate, even though he was considerably younger? Did you see that sort of leadership, that excellence in the early going, and what was he like as a teammate?
I mean, you knew that he had it in him, the ability to be that way. I think, it's, for me, as an older guy, watching new players come in, you always kind of watch how guys handle themselves around the room, and especially for me, around staff. How do they treat training staff, equipment staff? How do they treat people around the rink? How do they treat their teammates? And he always knocked that out of the park. He had those traits in spades, and I think it's a credit to his parents and the way that he was raised. And I think typically when you see that kind of behavior, it speaks to something else within that person, and it's usually leadership. I think everyone in Ottawa knew what he was already like. I think that Four Nations was a real coming out party for him, probably on more of a national stage, for other markets to really see and other fans to really see what he was like as a player. I hear a lot of guys around the league call him, he's a unicorn. You get a guy with that much skill, those leadership qualities, who plays that hard. It's a pretty unique, a pretty special player. So certainly happy for him. Nice to, have seen him as a rookie in the league and see what he is now. And, just like a quick Brady story, quick little anecdote, like about who he is, the way he treats people. I believe at this time they didn't even have a child yet, but he had come to, a birthday party for kids through mutual friends in hockey. He showed up, no kids, no one, showed up by himself, played with all of our kids for an hour and a half, soaking wet, sweating, football, soccer, whatever the kids wanted, he was right in the mix. I think that kind of speaks to him as a person and who he is.
Yeah. And he is a big kid himself. He really does seem to appreciate time with young fans and things. You see him, when that floss dance was a big thing 3 or 4 years ago, there's kids, on the other side of the glass in warm up who want to, have a dance off or something. He's doing that in the middle of the warm up and ready for an NHL game. So yeah, he seems like a pretty special character for sure. And it was good to see his dad this week actually talking about, because his contract does expire in 3 years. And Keith was giving an interview with ESPN, and he sort of threw that in there that, he thinks he's not going to necessarily do what Dad and what Matthew did and move on elsewhere, that he's actually pretty confident that he wants to stay in Ottawa long term, which was great news to see for Sens fans. Whether it pans out that way, who knows, but it's certainly a great sign because, he's the face of the franchise right now, no question. But as we go back to 2017 and the last playoff run before this spring, what are the memories of that one like? And I wonder about, first of all, I'd love to know the circumstances because I know you only played 2 games in that playoffs. Was that a Guy Boucher decision or was that an injury situation?
Yes, I think it was game 2 at home, I believe, right? I went for a hit on, I can't remember who it was, kind of on a track back out of the ozone, missed my feet first into the boards and tore a ligament in my ankle. We call them a high ankle sprain, but it's like grade 3 where you tear quite significantly. So long, frustrating rehab process for sure. Was ready to go for game 1 of the Cup Finals, which would have been against the Preds, I guess, right? So, I was pretty fired up for that and hopeful for that, and obviously pretty heartbroken when it didn't manifest that way. But I was told I'd be in the lineup and ready to play for game 1 as an Ottawa kid, seeing the NHL kind of preemptively starting to set up production, and at that time it wasn't CTC, but I believe, right? But was it CTC then? I can't even remember.
I think it was in Pittsburgh. I remember the fans going bonkers.
Well, but was it what was our rink called Scotiabank? I think at that. I can't even remember. Yeah. Anyway, that's beside the fact. What they were setting up, the NHL was setting up production stuff in the players' parking lot for the Cup Finals, and it just kind of hit me. I was like, I'm going to be playing the Cup Finals here in Ottawa, my hometown, and then obviously didn't go that way. So, that was a tough one, but such is life as a hockey player, and you got to learn and deal with those things. So, special year for sure. Wish we could have gone all the way, but again, kind of is what it is.
You've spent more time than you'd like on the DL. Was that particular time on the DL the most torturous, just watching the dream play out, this whole playoff run and having to miss it all?
Yeah, it was tough. I traveled with the team too, because the athletic staff wanted to kind of have their hands on me and, be in full control of the rehab settings. So, tough for sure. Being an MSG, the Boston series, those were hard to be around, and not being, in the battle, in the fight. I think that's one thing, I think I miss most now being outside of the game, is that being in the fight, kind of like boots on the ground, being in the trenches with the guys going through the ups and downs. You miss that. And I miss that in that setting too. But again, you play the game a certain way, you play hard, you're going to miss time. So you got to learn to deal with it.
How is your health now? I get back to the playoffs from 2017 in a second, but I'm curious to know how you're feeling these days, because, you had a lot of concussion issues, and that was inevitably what took away your last season, and that's why you called it a career. How are you generally feeling? You feeling back to normal?
Yeah, good. Yeah, it took a couple of months, I would say, a few months, with some kind of lingering issues. But I feel great now. I train hard, probably in better shape now than I was playing, to be honest, because I'm not as anxious and kind of worn down to the bone as I was when I was playing, in terms of overall health. But I train hard for sure. Like I said, a good example for the guys that I'm working with, trying to kind of mentor. So, I take that side pretty seriously still. I always kind of give my boss a nudge and ask him if he wants to give me a PTO in the American League, but he said he's got too many vets on the AHL vet rule, so at least I know where I stand for that. But no, yeah, I feel great. I appreciate you asking. So again, it's one of those things. I think I wore those injuries. I took them pretty heavy and took them to heart. Felt like I was letting people down and let the team down. Then let myself down. I think you feel a little bit of shame sometimes, which is, again, I think part of the job now for me is helping guys through those situations in a rehab setting. But there was a comment from, I think, Matthew Tkachuk during playoffs. They asked him, you guys play a certain way in the regular season, and you seem to be able to, kick it into gear in playoffs. And he's like, well, it's just not sustainable to play that way for 82 games. And I kind of look back on the way that I was wired, and I think it kind of gave me a little peace, kind of hearing that, because I was like, you know what, I did play that way every game, and because of it, I was 60 games a year, and I think it kind of helps old washed up guys like me when they hear some of the current guys talk that way, kind of digest some of the things that we've gone through. So,
but it also makes you one of the more popular guys who've ever played for the Sens, so that's it's always endearing to the fan base, for sure. But yeah, you never know. I mean, the Sens are loading up on guys who are older than you now. They've got 4 or 5 guys that are probably older.
Oh man, yeah, carrying a few extra right now. I'm not sure the conditioning's good. The strength is good. I'm not sure the conditioning's. I'm not sure the puck skills are where they need to be either. So, not that I have much to begin with, but they've gone downhill from there. So.
It's all good. So back to 2017 playoffs. A couple of things. I was curious about Guy Boucher. He's he has this great run in Tampa Bay, and then the next couple of years not that great, and then disappears for a while. Then comes back in the NHL, and great first season, takes Sens to the conference final, and then not great years after that, and disappears for a while, and then shows up for a year with the Leafs. He's a bit of an enigma as far as an NHL coach goes, but he was, I guess what the doctor ordered in 2017, a goal away from the Stanley Cup final is not nothing. And so I'm curious to know, what was it like to play for Guy Boucher back in the day?
Yeah, I think the thing that sticks out for me is tactically, in terms of X's and O's, in terms of systems, in terms of being very clear about, how he wants the game played. He was one of the best that I played for. His X's and O's were excellent. I think he's a very intelligent hockey mind in terms of systematic play. And again, telling you what he wants to do. There wasn't a lot of gray area in the way we played. I think you could see that in our neutral zone. I think it suited players like me. So, again, excellent at that. And I think, the lesson for me now, wanting to potentially move on to that side of things is, I think, the real important thing is how you communicate with players, develop relationships, and how you keep it fresh. How do you have a presence? How do you have energy? X's and O's are great. We need them. We need systems. I've played every system under the sun. They all work, and they all work when you get guys to buy in.
Right.
So that's kind of the lesson I think that I take from it. I don't think that's necessarily a knock on him. I think we all, as players, as coaches, as scouts, as staff, whatever it may be, as development guys, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right? I think it's, kind of learning from those weaknesses, learning from those strengths, maybe doubling down your strengths a little bit, but also realizing, like, how do I bring up those weaknesses? I mean, the big takeaway for me, again, is that energy, that presence, that ability to kind of connect with your players, develop those interpersonal skills and those relationships. I think that's how you kind of spur a group on to get over the hump again.
The theory that I had, given that Guy Boucher seemed to really, he demanded sort of that balls to the wall defensive style. At least that's my perception of it. And and maybe this goes back to what we just talked about with Matthew Tkachuk and your comments as well about every single shift going, all out all the time. That's really hard to sustain over 82 games. So you have that great playoff run with this really sublime defense. And then you come back the following year and things they fell apart pretty quickly the following season. Everybody kind of expected, you're that close to the Stanley Cup final. This team's on its way. And it went the other direction. I think it finished like 30th or something that year. So I wonder, is that Guy Boucher style tough to sustain over the long haul? It's one thing to, ascending to the playoffs and doing really, really well. But then you're back in September and asked to do exactly the same thing for 82 games and that far away from another opportunity to go deep. Is that a difficult thing?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's a valid point. I'll throw a line at you from another former Sens coach, Paul McLean. He used to say, painters paint and plumbers plumb, in terms of players. And I think sometimes in the regular season, you got to let your painters paint.
Right.
You know, you need guys who get you to the playoffs, and then you need guys who win in the playoffs. I think it's a balancing act for coaches. You know, you have to demand a certain standard in terms of defensive buy-in for sure. You know, I think one of the hallmarks of our game in the O-zone was pulling that F3 high and almost playing 3 high across the blue line. It led to a lot of great layers defensively. I think shutting a lot of things down. But, you know, you got 2 guys low in the O-zone. You got an opportunity to get out man low by other teams, and you've got an F3, usually an offensive player playing high, you know, in high ice. And certainly there's offensive looks off of that. But I think after a while, you know, the novelty can wear off a little bit. And again, that's why, you know, I kind of bring it back to that ability to kind of have that presence, have that energy to connect with your players, to motivate them, to create buy-in. Because I think if you are going to play a tactically sort of, you know, demanding system in terms of X's and O's, you've got to be able to back that up with that energy and presence. You know, again, good lessons for me, I think, as I kind of take that next step and move on to the next chapter. And I think that's kind of that everyday ongoing battle you see with a lot of teams and coaches in the NHL right now.
Staying with coaching, going from Guy Boucher to another coach that fans have some strong feelings about, and that's DJ Smith. And you were at least one season under DJ, if I recall, maybe 2?
Yeah, it might have just been the one, and then I left. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Okay, so one season. What were your general impressions of DJ Smith? Because the knock on him was maybe a little in the other direction. He played in the NHL as a defenseman himself, but he had the rap that, you know, about accountability and maybe that, you know, that defense was not where it should be. And I don't know, what was it like to play for DJ Smith from a player's standpoint?
I love playing for DJ. I think you can probably look at my statistics and see it was the best year in the NHL for me. It was a career year, and I largely attribute that to him taking the time to treat me like a human being. Day one, he brought me into his office, talked to me about some of the issues that I was having away from the game. I'm pretty open about some of the struggles I've had and worked through. And day one, he was there for me, connected with me right away, and it made me want to go through a wall for him. So again, you know, a lesson for me in terms of motivating players, in terms of connecting with players and trying to get the most out of them. You know, I think we were in a different place organizationally in terms of expectation. At that point, like we were still, you know, we were step one of a rebuild, I think, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. At that point, we were kind of tearing it down. Yeah. So, you know, I can't really speak to what transpired in Ottawa after me. Again, you know, I really genuinely enjoyed playing for DJ. I think the expectations certainly changed and evolved from when I left. You know, you don't want to be in this perpetual rebuild, and I get it. You know, there's expectations on, but I think there were some factors probably out of his control in terms of personnel decisions and stuff like that. So, but for me, personal experience, I still talk to DJ. We talk on the phone. We check in. You know, he was good to me. He did a lot for me as a person. And it's, you know, I keep a little notebook of things I write down, thoughts that I like, ideas that I like in terms of where I want to go and how I want to handle myself. And a big one is, you know, I think you got to coach the human first, coach the individual first. And he certainly did that for me, and it stuck with me.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, it was, at that time it just felt like everything was, I don't know, bleeding on down from the owner's suite down. And obviously things have changed a great deal here. And my colleague at the Hockey News, Graham Nichols, keeps throwing out the same joke that, you know, he has great respect for you and would love to see you back in the Sens organization. And he keeps making the same joke about that if you did ever come back to the organization, the first thing you would need to do would be to have one of those Between the Two Ferns interviews with Michael Andlauer, the owner. So, I mean, I wanted to ask the question, and like, how did that interview with Eugene Melnyk come about? I don't know if you want to go down that road or not, but I'm curious to know, like, what made them think that was the game plan? Why did they do that exactly?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll preface it all by saying I think as you get older, you learn a lot of lessons in humility too, right? I think humility is just for me, the gold standard in terms of character traits and something that I try to get better at all the time. I think you get put in untenable situations sometimes, and you've got to make a decision. Sometimes the decision is fully in your control and sometimes it's not. Things got billed to me a certain way that they would be, community related, marketing related, which I think everyone knows. An Ottawa guy through and through. I took a lot of pride in terms of what my name was and my reputation was around the city, for the things that I've done and the things that I took a lot of passion in doing. And I think after it all transpired, I felt like I was taken advantage of a little bit. I feel like, they tried to use me in terms of, how I was viewed in the city and try to benefit off that. It was a real, I think, point of contention when I left, in terms of how I was treated internally after that. All I really wanted at that point was just kind of an apology, being put in that situation. And it was tough to come by. So, for me, I couldn't really move past that. Again, I'm not going to sit here and place blame at everyone else's feet. I think, again, there's a lesson in humility here. It's funny to laugh at now. You kind of look back and you're like, man, those are some dark days for the organization. That stunk being in that situation. That stunk the immediate couple of weeks after. That was hard on me. It was really tough to go through that, but you kind of put yourself in that situation regardless of whether you felt like you had the control or not. And just a lesson to learn from and something to laugh about after.
I thought you did a great job, all in all. I mean, it was just a hard situation to be put in, but you did the best you could with it. And it's why I keep hassling you that you need to do a podcast of your own, even if you have to host it. You don't have to, even in this chair, in fact, you did a good job.
Oh, you want me to air out my dirty laundry or what? I tried to give you the political speak there, so
no.
Maybe I should run for local office or something there.
No. It was no. It's a tricky question, obviously. So you did. It was great. So let's finish with some levity. Some randoms off who's the greatest goal scorer, Wayne Gretzky or Alex Ovechkin? And hear me out. Ovechkin has the most goals, but Gretzky's, up in the 90s for, at least a couple of years there, or at least 1 year, but in the 80s after that. So he had some seasons Ovechkin never had. Like, who is the greatest goal scorer in your opinion?
I'll say Obi. Again, probably a bit of like personal / recency bias for me playing against him. And then for me, it's just like the quality of goaltending in the era that he scored in, is high. And that guy, he shoots everything. He rips the puck. He wants to score. I'll say Obi.
All right. Best fighter you ever came across?
Oh, geez. I mean, I got my face punched in by Lucic 3 times, I think. I had a pretty good one against him in Nashville, toe-to-toe, and he still got the better of me. I think like 2 shifts later, I dropped my gloves again and tried to fight him again, and my coaches were like, what are you doing? He was tough. Tactically, I will say Chris Neal, hands down.
Okay.
Not just because I'm friends with him. You look at his size and who he fought and how he did against people. Like, that guy, for me, has got to be pound for pound one of the toughest guys to ever play the game. So I'll say Nealer.
Who would you say is the dirtiest player you ever came across?
Dirtiest player. Should I name myself or what? I had a lot of suspensions.
The one I'll throw out there. The one I'll throw out there is the guy that flies under the radar with most NHL fans. But, you had firsthand experience of getting cross-checked in the mouth by him, spitting chiclets. Like Chris Weidman got landed on. Oopsie. Yeah. Yevgeny Malkin would be in that discussion for me.
I've still got braces on my lowers right now. Can't get my top 2 teeth fixed until those are fixed, and that's from that cross-check. So, sneaky for sure. I mean, there's the guys who are like rats, A guy playing in Ottawa right now, Perron. You always wanted to stick him. There was guys back in the day. I didn't cross paths with them a ton, but guys you were aware of, like, the Rafi Torreses. For me, I think when you talk about just like sheer intimidation factor, especially in today's game with less fighting, it's the guys who are like unpredictable, predatory hitters. I was one of those guys. Got to, claimed a couple of ACLs, whether right or wrong. You're one of those guys circle your name. They don't know where you're coming from. There's a reason for me, like Radko Gudas is still effective in the NHL. Like, you don't know where that guy's coming from. Tom Wilson, that's part of his game too. These guys will rip your head off. That's what scares guys more than fighting. I can speak to that from being inside a locker room for a long time. Call them dirty if you want, but I think they're pretty effective. So.
The Florida Panthers are pretty effective, and this is the final one today. They've got such great balance. They've got the goaltending. They got a big defense. They can play it any way you want, skilled or smash mouth. Like, they just seem like so balanced, and that's part of why they win 2 Stanley Cups, and they turn it on, like you said earlier, at just the right time. Do you feel like maybe it's cyclical, but is Florida the team that everybody's trying to copy right now, do you think?
I think you're bang on. Like, the league moves in waves, right? Moves in cycles. It's a copycat league. The most overused line in hockey. It's a copycat league. It truly is. And I think with good reason. You see what's had success, and you try to emulate that. I mean, it's obviously not a perfect science because you don't have the same personnel and there's other constraints, but I think you're seeing a little more meaty on your back end, some more length. Take up lanes, you take up space, and you contest every puck. That's the biggest thing for me with them and how they play. Every guy there contests every puck. Like, there are no free passes. And that is, we can talk about, when I was playing, there's the advent of like puck possession, right? We just want to possess the puck all game. Well, I'm telling you, when you're going to get planted every time you touch the puck, for guys who play, girls who play, when every puck's going to be contested, it's tough. It's hard. It wears on you. And I think they play that way. They've got some creativity and some offense. And, I said before, you need talent to win. They undoubtedly have the talent in spades. Then you back that up with the way they compete, the way they contest pucks, the way they play physically. It's a pretty nice package, and obviously a pretty sustainable way to win. So I think you're going to see a lot of teams going in that direction, especially for me in terms of size and bite on your back end.
All right, some great stuff there from Mark Borowiecki, ladies and gentlemen. Ran the gamut of all kinds of different topics and handled beautifully across the board. And
smarter than I look. Hopefully, Steve.
Yes. No. I don't want to be insulting. So tell me, did you get a rink in for the kids this past winter, and are you planning it again?
I did. Yeah, we got some good skates. I think we're out there kind of like, we were double digits for sure. I mean, my little ones are 2 and 3, so that's, and they're Nashville babies, my girls. So the cold still doesn't quite sit right with them. My son's pretty gung ho. My dad had digitized some old VHSs of me when I was a kid, rollerblading in my parents' unfinished basement. So when he caught wind of that, he rollerblades a ton. He was out there on the outdoor rink, so we will do that. I think I put it a little too close to the old basement sump pump there. My sump pump was running about every 10 seconds in spring. I was having a bit of a panic attack there, so I will be shifting the location of my rink this year. Live and learn. I guess you'd rather have the sump pump running than not, but yeah, I'm pretty fortunate. We've got a little bit of space and land here, so I will be moving that back into the woods a little further away from the foundation. So,
yeah, life in rural Ottawa with well and septic and sump pumps and things like that. That's probably not something you necessarily thought of when you're growing up in Canada, right?
No, exactly. So I was like, man, this thing's running a lot this spring, and then I was like, called our contractor, and he's like, yeah, you're on bedrock, buddy. That's all filtering right into your basement. So, I'll have to be a little more calculated about that next year.
Well, thanks so much for this, Mark. Really appreciate you jumping on as our co-host / guest today, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Always happy to chat. I think I'm in the stage of life where I love talking hockey, so I appreciate the opportunity to do it. Thank you very much.
And there goes Mark Borowiecki, ladies and gentlemen. We thank him for being on the show today. Don't forget that our website is SENSNationHockey.com. Do check out the hockey news, THN.com/Ottawa for all kinds of Sens articles that continue to churn on here in the dog days of summer. We appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you next time.